In this Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous video, I'm going to be covering the Bloodrager class. This is a class that was added with Wrath of the Righteous, and it's sort of a mixture of the Barbarian class and the Sorcerer class. Bloodragers sacrifice rage powers and danger sense, things that the Barbarian gets, in exchange for being able to cast these spells, a certain amount of spells from Sorcerer, not as much as Sorcerers, obviously. And they also gain the ability to cast spells while they're raging, which is something that Barbarians cannot do. Bloodragers gain a bloodline just the way Sorcerers do, however the effects of that bloodline are drastically different than those of the Sorcerer, so you'll need to look through these and see what they do. If you're having trouble figuring out what bloodline to go with, I highly recommend going with the Arcane bloodline. It's just good all around. Because Bloodragers use spells, and they can cast them up to medium armor without any arcane spell failure, they're probably going to wear medium armor. This means their stat distribution is going to be spread between strength for melee attacks, probably, constitution for health, charisma for their spell casting and number of spells, as well as dexterity for their armor class. So they have a pretty hefty stat spread, and it's going to be hard to get very high in all of those. So you're going to have to decide exactly how much charisma you want, because the Bloodrager class isn't really going to deal a lot of damage with their spells. They only gain up to level 4 spells, so they're not going to be like flinging spells at enemies with regularity. They're going to use these spells primarily to buff themselves or their teammates, or maybe to cleanse effects, etc., or buff their damage. So you're not really going to be like an offensive mage with these spells. So you're really going to have to decide how much charisma do you need, how much dexterity do you need, how much strength do you need, and you're going to have to spread those points around pretty well. Taking a look at the archetypes, starting with Bloodrider first, the essential difference here is that you lose Uncanny Dodge and Improved Uncanny Dodge, so your reflex saving throws are not going to be quite as effective. And in exchange, you're going to gain an animal companion that is a little bit more accurate and deals a little bit more damage than the average mount. So if you're somebody who wants to do mounted combat as a Bloodrider or a Bloodrager, this would be the class for you. The Greenrager archetype essentially sacrifices your Blood Sanctuary, which makes you move faster, in exchange for summoning spells. So if you're a Bloodrager who wants to be able to cast and summon allies while you fight, then this would be the archetype you'd want to choose. Moving along to the Mixed Bloodrager, this archetype's really interesting because it allows you to choose the bloodline you want each day. You can only do it one time before you need to rest. So, but once you've chosen it, it'll stay on that one until you choose something else. So if you want the freedom to like try around different bloodlines, it's not a bad idea. But additionally, at level 4, they get a second bloodline that they can do the same thing to. So you're effectively going to get the benefits of 2 different bloodlines at the same time, which is pretty strong. Now, you might think, well, what's the catch? Well, there is a catch. The big catch here is that you can't cast spells as this Bloodrager class. This isn't something that's very obvious when you're going through character creation. So you're losing out on all spell casting ability in order to gain that second bloodline. So you're going to gain a good amount of strength from that second bloodline, but you're going to lose out on spell casting, and you have to decide for yourself whether that's worth it or not. Okay, up next is Primalist, and Primalist is possibly the best Bloodrager archetype out of all of them. It essentially allows you to trade every 4 levels your bloodline power, whatever you get at that level, for 2 rage powers. So as I mentioned before, Barbarians get rage powers every 2 levels. Bloodragers do not have this ability. However, the Primalist archetype essentially allows you to have this ability if you want it, and still be able to cast spells or take bloodline powers and get benefits from bloodline powers. This means you sort of get the best of both worlds. You lose out on danger sense, which honestly isn't that much of a loss, in order to be able to have the flexibility to play as a Barbarian at some levels and a Bloodrager at others, if you catch my meaning, because you can pick between bloodline powers or rage powers, so you can get rage powers and have bloodline powers, and it's really, really strong. So if you're considering playing a Bloodrager, you may want to go with this one. Up next is the Reformed Fiend. This archetype essentially limits you to the Tiefling race, so as long as you don't mind playing a Tiefling, you can play this. And it's going to limit the bloodlines you can choose to Infernal and Abyssal, so you'll have to choose one of those. But in exchange for that, you gain more attack rolls and damage versus evil as you level up while you're blood raging. This is really strong. There's a lot of evil creatures in this game because of the demons and things. So this is going to make over double the effectiveness of your blood rage in a lot of cases. And your damage reduction that, the Bloodragers normally get and Barbarians normally get is going to be switched from just general damage reduction to damage reduction of evil. So it's not going to be quite as effective, but it will be pretty good against evil. Also, at level 11, you're going to gain Way of Redemption, which makes so that all of your attacks are good aligned for the purposes of overcoming damage reduction. This is not a bad archetype to pick, probably behind Primalist for me, but it's really high up there in terms of priority as long as you don't mind playing the Tiefling race. The Spelleater archetype sacrifices their damage reduction passives and uncanny dodge in exchange for gaining health every round, which increases as they level up, and for the ability for them to consume any of their spells in order to heal themselves for 1d8 of the spell's level. Since they cap out at level 4 spells, that's going to be a maximum of 32 health. This is not a bad archetype. It's probably not at the top of my list, but the ability to heal yourself constantly and to consume spells to heal yourself can really get you out of a pinch, and this can be done as a swift action too, so you can still attack and move on the same turn. And the last archetype is Steelblood. This allows the Bloodrager to use heavy armor with no arcane spell failure in combat. So if you want to be able to cast spells and wear heavy armor and still gain the benefits of Bloodrager while wearing heavy armor, then you're going to pick this one. You lose out on uncanny dodge, fast movement, and your damage reduction, so there is trade-offs here. And you might think, well, this is not a bad choice because then I can like dump dexterity and just pump strength, constitution, and charisma, but you actually gain armor training with this archetype, so that means that your dexterity is going to be able to sneak through your armor class bonus. So you'll still want dexterity, maybe you don't need as much, but it's not going to completely allow you to dump dexterity unless you want to like lose out on some of that armor class bonus. Additionally, sort of like the Spelleater, you can consume any spell in order to gain a deflection armor class bonus equal to the spell level, so that would be a maximum of +4 deflection, which isn't terrible. I'm not sure that's the greatest use of a spell, but it's also not the worst use either. If you're talking about looking over like what prestige classes and multi-classes work well with the Bloodrager, if we're talking about prestige classes first, I think the most obvious choice is Dragon Disciple. That's because you continue to gain your bloodline powers while choosing Dragon Disciple, so your bloodline progression is not going to stop when you pick that prestige class. Now, figuring out what breakpoint you want to switch over to Dragon Disciple is a whole nother matter because you don't want to lose out on, what other feats the Bloodrager provides you. You're figuring out what exactly is the best place for you depending on your archetype is a whole other thing. But Dragon Disciple is probably the obvious choice because you continue that bloodline progression while still gaining your spells and gaining other benefits. However, if you don't mind losing your bloodline powers, meaning like you don't care if they progress any further, maybe you got to a point where you're happy enough with what you have, choosing something like Eldritch Knight or Hell Knight Signifier are also an option. These will continue to provide you with spells as you level up and give you other bonuses as well. Talking about what classes to use that aren't prestige classes to multi-class with, one particularly interesting thing about the Bloodrager is it doesn't have to be of a particular alignment the way that Barbarian does, meaning that you can actually choose a lawful alignment, so you could multi-class it with something like a monk or a paladin. I'm not saying that either of these is the greatest choice, but the option is there because they can choose lawful, some sort of lawful alignment if they want, which is not the case with Barbarian. That means if you took like a Primalist Bloodrager, you could essentially play the way a Barbarian would play, but you could mix it with, either of these classes. I think Paladin is probably a pretty good choice. They make use of Charisma just the same way that Bloodragers do. They use it for their spell casting, and they gain Smite Evil, which is very, very strong ability that allows you to bypass damage reduction, gives you bonus damage, etc. It's not going to be super strong if you don't take significant levels in Paladin, but maybe you just want to dip a little bit into Bloodrager and then go in, 15, 16 levels into Paladin. Something like that could work. I think Fighter is probably an obvious choice for people because of the fact that you're going to get things like Greater Weapon Focus, Weapon Specialization. But I think what I would say to those people looking at Fighter is that Eldritch Knight, if you're going to go that route, is a better way to go because it'll maintain your spell casting at the same time while giving you those Fighter bonus feats. You might not get as many Fighter bonus feats, but you're going to be able to keep continuing your spell progression, which is totally worth it. That's it for our Bloodrager class guide. If you guys have questions about the Bloodrager class, feel free to post them in the comments, and I'll try and answer as many of them as I can. We're going to keep going with these videos. We have some Diablo 2 videos coming up pretty quickly, so stay tuned for those. We are still working on the Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous wiki as well. We are adding more information every single day. This wiki is massive. I think it has over 3,000 pages, which is huge. We have to get all data from Pathfinder in there, plus anything that's unique or different to Wrath of the Righteous, which is a lot of information. So that's continuing to be updated. So make sure you check that out and bookmark that if you need help with the game. What did you guys think of the class guide? What classes are you guys playing? Let us know in the comments below.